9 victories in just 23 races during the 4-speed era, 4 consecutive NHRA World Championships, the most dominant driver-engine combination in pro stock history. This is the story of how Ronnie Socks and Buddy Martin turned a manual Plymouth Hemi into the most feared weapon on the drag strip. Before electronic wizardry and computer-controlled everything, drag racing was about one thing: the human behind the wheel. And in the early days of pro stock, no man was more feared on the drag strip than Ronnie Socks. They called him Mr. 4-speed for a reason. This Carolina legend could shift gears faster than most automatics. And when you paired his supernatural shifting skills with a screaming 426 Hemi, it was instant magic. The early 70s was drag racing's last stand for pure driving skill. These manual transmission monsters demanded perfect timing, brutal strength, and nerves of steel to tame. You had to clutch, shift, and manage wheel spin while hurtling down the quarter mile at 140+ miles per hour. One missed shift, one moment of hesitation, and you were watching taillights. Socks didn't just master this art, he redefined it. His power-shifting technique was so violent and so precise that spectators could hear the difference. While other drivers were babying their transmissions, Socks was treating his like a sledgehammer, slamming through gears with a rhythm that became his signature soundtrack later on. First, a history lesson before we dive deeper. The Socks Martin story had a frustrating start. You see, Buddy Martin was a decent racer with a 409 Chevy, but every weekend he'd line up against this quiet North Carolina guy named Ronnie Socks and get absolutely destroyed. Race after race, Socks's 409 would leave Martin in the dust, until finally Martin realized something. If you can't beat him, hire him. The proposal was simple. Martin would provide a brand new 1963 Z11 427 Chevrolet if Socks would drive it. Socks said yes, and at that moment, the most dominant partnership that would terrorize drag racing for a decade was born. When Chevrolet pulled out of racing in 1964, most teams scrambled, but not Socks. Martin, Buddy's business sense kicked in at this moment, and they switched to Mercury, later to Plymouth, when the 426 Hemi arrived in 1965. Each transition made them stronger, more focused, and more dangerous. By the time Pro Stock was officially created in 1970, they weren't just ready, they were unstoppable. Let's talk about the weapon that made it all possible. The 426 Hemi. This wasn't just an engine, it was a mechanical apocalypse wrapped in Plymouth sheet metal, making 425 horsepower from the factory. But in Socks Martin's hands, it became something far more sinister. Jake King, their legendary engine builder, didn't just tune Hemis. He converted them into monsters. We are talking prototype Edelbrock tunnel ram intake manifolds, twin Holley 4-barrel carburetors gulping air like a drowning man, 13, one compression that required racing fuel and nerves of steel, and solid roller camshafts that made the engine sound like a machine gun at idle. But the real magic happened when Socks got behind the wheel. That A833 4-speed transmission became an extension of his nervous system. First to second, second to third, third to fourth. Each shift executed with surgical precision while managing over 400 horsepower, trying to tear the car apart. When NHRA officially launched Pro Stock in 1970, it was the launch of something revolutionary. A heads-up, no handicap class, where the fastest car simply won. No weight breaks, no index times, just pure speed and driving skill. In other words, it was exactly what Socks and Martin had been waiting for their entire careers. The 1970 season was a masterclass in domination. After losing the season opener to Bill Jenkins, Sox and his team went on an absolute tear. They didn't just win races. They demolished the competition so completely that other teams started wondering if they should even bother showing up. Ronnie's shifting technique was literally superhuman. While automatic transmissions were becoming more popular, Sox proved that a perfectly driven manual could still be faster. His power shifting was so violent that transmissions would literally explode from the stress. But when they held together, nothing could touch him. Spectators would time his shifts, first to second in 0.3 seconds, second to third even faster. The Sox Martin team wasn't just about having the fastest car. It was about building a complete system designed for total domination. Their red, white, and blue Plymouth Cudas were rolling billboards for American muscle. But underneath the pretty paint was serious business. The cars themselves were works of engineering art. Factory acid-dipped bodies to save weight, moved floorboards, and relocated body panels for better weight distribution, along with a rack and pinion steering system that had never been tried in drag racing before. Every bolt was rifle drilled, and every component was lightened to the absolute minimum. But the real innovation was in the details. The suspension was tuned for one thing: getting maximum traction off the line without lifting the front wheels too high. The gear ratios were calculated to perfection, allowing Sox to use his shifting skills to maximum advantage. Even the seat position was customized, so Sox could work the clutch and shifter with machine-like precision. Sox Martin weren't just racers. They were pioneers of automotive marketing. In 1967, they also launched the revolutionary Supercar Clinic program, taking their show to Plymouth dealerships across the country. This wasn't just about selling cars. It was about selling a lifestyle. Picture this: Sox rolling up to a dealership with his latest Hemi-powered monster, doing burnouts in the parking lot, and then giving driving tips to young enthusiasts. They showcased Plymouth's latest muscle cars, demonstrated Mopar performance parts, and encouraged kids to race at sanctioned drag strips instead of the streets. The program was a massive success because Sox and Martin were the real deal. They weren't just hired guns reading from a script. They were living proof that Plymouth street cars could be transformed into championship-winning machines. When Sox talked about power shifting technique or Martin explained engine modifications, people listened because they were watching the masters at work. But like all great eras, the four-speed dominance had to end. In 1972, NHRA allowed Lenco planetary transmissions, EZSE, essentially automatic transmissions that could be manually controlled. Suddenly, Sox's supernatural shifting advantage was neutralized. Any driver could now shift as fast as the master himself. The writing was on the wall. But Sox Martin didn't go quietly. They adapted, switching to lighter duster bodies and smaller displacement engines to stay competitive. But the magic was gone. The era of pure driving skill determining race outcomes had ended, replaced by technology that made average drivers competitive with legends. By the late 1970s, with corporate sponsorship drying up due to the recession, the Sox import partnership finally ended. Ronnie continued racing as a hired gun, but it was never quite the same. The four-speed era was over, taking one of the most dominant partnerships in motorsport history along with it. Today, Sox, IOA, Martin's legacy lives on in every manual transmission drag car, every Hemi engine build, and every driver who believes that skill matters more than technology. They proved that with the right combination of talent, preparation, and sheer determination, two guys from North Carolina could take on Detroit's best and still come out on top. The numbers tell the story: 9 victories in 23 races during the four-speed era, and 4 consecutive NHRA World Championships. Countless match race victories across the country. But the real legacy isn't in the trophies. It's in the revolution they started. proving that drag racing could be both professional entertainment and pure competition. Ronnie Sachs passed away in 2006, but Buddy Martin is still active in the Mopar community, sharing stories and keeping the flame alive. Their cars are museum pieces now, but the legend of the four-speed Hemi that ruled Pro Stock will never die. Want to hear more stories from drag racing's golden age? Check out our other videos where we dive deep into the machines and legends that built the sport we love today.